It is arguable that Batman has one of the most monstrous rogues galleries in the DC universe, fighting anything from shape-shifting mountains of clay to hulking zombies. However, out of all these beastly behemoths, which is the ultimate monster? In this video, I aim to answer that question by analysing 5 candidates before selecting my winner. Just who is the most monstrous Batman villain? According to various dictionary definitions, a monster is an imaginary or legendary creature that is strange to behold and large in size. Often these monstrosities tend to combine animalistic and human features to create an oddity. However, the concept of monstrous goes beyond physical appearance, as it can also suggest wrongful actions that are outrageously evil. Whatever the combination, all dictionary definitions contain one common word: frightening. Therefore, these definitions have formed my criteria. I will be basing my choices on large creatures that have a frightening appearance, often combining the features of various animals who perform evil actions and are frightening to behold. With my criteria established, I will commence the countdown. My 5th place entry introduces arguably one of the most notorious of monsters that has populated folk traditions in a variety of cultures for centuries. Few creatures embody the idea of monster more fittingly than a werewolf, as they have dominated folklore tales, literature, and films across a plethora of cultures. Oddly, however, this character has largely been absent from the Batman universe, only making a few cameo appearances. One such example is in Batman number 255, which introduced the character of Anthony Lupus, a victim of lycanthropy.
Number 5. Anthony Lupus.
This menacing beast possessed increased size and muscularity, claws, fangs, enhanced senses, superhuman reflexes, superhuman stamina, and superhuman strength. As a celebrated Olympic decathlon athlete, Lupus was over the moon with his career until he was plagued with a series of vicious headaches. Desperately seeking a cure, Lupus turned to Dr. Milo, who seemingly found him a successful treatment, a serum mixed with the blood of Alaskan wolves. Although this concoction cured his headaches, there was one terrifying side effect, being severe lycanthropy. Milo would subsequently prey on Lupus's desperation by using the serum to accelerate his lycanthropy and coerce him into eliminating Batman. With the promise of an antidote, Lupus would indeed do Milo's bidding until his ferocity became uncontrollable, sending him into fits of fury. This would eventually see him turn on his doctor, attacking him in the same way that Frankenstein's monster attacked his creator over a century earlier. There are parallels between this story and that of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Both seem to contain the allegory that interfering with nature can create uncontrollable monstrosities that wreak havoc on their creators and society in general. Despite turning on his doctor, Lupus's monstrous savagery would still see him attack the Dark Knight and almost succeed in killing him. It would take being impaled by a steel rod before being struck by lightning to stop this beast. Even upon its apparent destruction, the werewolf's body cannot be found, making both the reader and Batman question its whereabouts. This ending reminds me of society's view on shapeshifters or werewolves, with so many cultures believing in their existence. Despite this, no one can prove or disprove their being, and just like Batman, we wonder if they're out there lurking in the shadows under a full moon. Without any doubt, Anthony Lupus belongs on this list, as he has the classically monstrous appearance, blending the features of humans and wolves to create a strange or frightening monstrosity. His size is also augmented upon his transformations, and his actions, although influenced by Milo, are indeed evil. So if Lupus is so monstrous, then why is he only in 5th place? Quite simply, this character is far too obscure within the Batman universe, but more importantly, I think that he is more of a victim than a monster. Lupus's career is in tatters due to his poor physical health. Upon seeking the help of a doctor, he becomes an experiment and is blackmailed into committing monstrous acts. Lupus has little control over his actions, and just like the Hulk and Frankenstein's monster, it is his own suffering that causes his rage. Therefore, the true monster in this story is Dr. Milo, who abuses his position of power to use another person's desperation for his own gain. It is Milo that blackmails Lupus, it is Milo that wants to kill Batman, and it is Milo that destroys the life of Anthony Lupus. The zombie character has dominated cinema since the 1930s, terrifying audiences for decades with classics like George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. However, my fourth place entry seems to splice the zombie character with another popular monster in the Hulk.
Number 4. Solomon Grundy.
At number 4, I have none other than the ogre known as Solomon Grundy. With his towering height of 9'2" and a massive 980 pounds of bulk, this mountain of muscle certainly fits my monster criteria for his large size. In addition to this, his zombie physiology gives him a frightening appearance, as well as allowing him regenerative, resurrection, and energy absorption capabilities. However, perhaps the most monstrous aspects of this character are his gruesome killings and grisly origins. One of the most quintessential reads for Solomon Grundy is Scott Collins' 7-part issue titled Solomon Grundy. This epic and rather complex story tells the tale of Cyrus Gold, who is visited by the Phantom Stranger and told that he has one chance to end Solomon Grundy once and for all. The stranger tells Cyrus that he has 7 days to find his killer and the murder weapon before forgiving him. At this point, his soul will be saved and his curse as Solomon Grundy will be lifted. Cyrus is told that he must accomplish this before the Blackest Night, otherwise his soul will be lost forever. Upon this journey of self-discovery and redemption, Cyrus is forced to confront his personal demons as he remembers the details of his gruesome past. One such memory includes him witnessing the death of his father as a child, as well as visiting the site of his own destruction, Slaughter Swamp. Many of these recollections cause Cyrus both emotional and physical torment, and on one occasion he is torn apart by crocodiles before being born again as Solomon Grundy when the moon rises. As the flashbacks continue, it is revealed that Cyrus was once presented with a deal by a man who offered him riches and power if he would work for him. Cyrus agreed, and the man stated that Cyrus would work for him until the day he died. As Cyrus begins his killings, he realizes that the knife he uses to kill others is the same one that eventually killed him. Upon his journey down memory lane, Cyrus also causes a path of destruction as Grundy, fighting the demon Etrigan, as well as destroying the Green Lantern Alan Scott's house, with his wife Molly still inside it. Amongst all this chaos, however, he does befriend Bizarro, and the two seem to recognize each other as monsters who suffer from similar afflictions. Subsequently, we get further insight into Cyrus' suffering as he collapses sobbing, remembering everyone that he has killed. To further compound his anguish, Cyrus cannot remember his killer and is therefore unable to forgive and break his curse. It is not until part 7 that Cyrus finally recollects the details of his own death when he rises out of the murky waters of Slaughter Swamp along with Solomon Grundy. Upon realizing that they have been used in the past week to become mindless killing machines, Cyrus finally finds the knife that killed him and reflects on what happened in 1885. After being chased to Slaughter Swamp and cornered, Cyrus dishonored his deal, refusing to be killed by anyone and concluding that his life was his own. Cyrus decided that he would live and die by his own hand before plunging the knife into his own heart. Ultimately, Cyrus made a deal with the devil that cost him his own life and saw him create the monster Solomon Grundy. Upon this realization, Cyrus would understand that he would forever be caught in a cycle of perpetual suffering. Aside from presenting us with a very literal monster in Solomon Grundy, this comic reveals a more realistic monster in Cyrus Gold. Like so many serial killers throughout history, he commits a series of gruesome murders not fully understanding his own actions. After being horrified by his own monstrous acts, he cannot break the vicious cycle, and as a result, he can never forgive himself. Despite facing his demons, Cyrus fails because he realizes that he is his own worst enemy. Throughout history, numerous cultures have told stories about shape-shifting monsters. In Norse folklore, they spoke about the berserkers who changed into wolves or bears, and just like Anthony Lupus at number 5, our next entry is also a shapeshifter.
Number 3. Clayface.
In third place I have Clayface, who has been portrayed by a number of different villains in the DC universe. However, for the purpose of this video, I'll be holistically referring to all versions of the character as Clayface. In most incarnations of this character, he appears to be a monster who can mould himself into any desired shape or size, no matter how large or strange. As one of the more uncanny Batman villains, Clayface remains a virtually indestructible shape-shifting ogre who terrorizes Gotham. This mud monster is certainly a worthy member on the Most Monstrous list, as he has the ability to morph from one monstrosity to the next. However, perhaps more disturbing is his ability to appear as the people you care about the most. This was certainly the case in the opening frames of Batman New 52, Nowhere Man, Batman Volume 1, number 19, where he appeared as Bruce Wayne during a bank robbery whilst holding a victim hostage before shooting Commissioner Gordon. In this comic, Clayface copies his victims so closely that he literally becomes the people he mimics, as his own DNA is slowly lost during the process. This augmented version of identity fraud is highly disturbing in today's world, but has also been a theme explored over the decades with films like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The idea of a monster mimicking the people we love is a terrifying thought, as our love for that person can make us extremely vulnerable. In addition to this, the malleable menace can take any form, blending into the masses, becoming just another face in the crowd. He can become anyone at any time, as he evades the law undetected in his chosen disguise. One of my personal favourite Clayface stories is called Midnight Madness by Kevin Shinick and Kelly Jones, which appears as a short in Joker's Asylum Volume 2. This comic tells the tale of washed-up horror actor Basil Karlo, who once starred in a film called The Terror before he was rejected by Hollywood for becoming a real monster. A group of teenagers called the Children of the Clay idolise both Karlo and the film, literally wanting to become a part of him. Clayface grants them their wish during a screening of his movie in the cinema, and together they become strong. The comic fantastically parodies some of Hollywood's cheesiest dialogue, such as Jerry Maguire's "You had me at hello," changing it for "You had me at I don't care if I die." Eventually, Batman arrives to save the Children of the Clay from Clayface, however they do not wish to be rescued and actually fight against the Dark Knight. With the Caped Crusaders' hands full, Clayface makes his exit and Batman is left questioning why these children have become obsessed with this monster. The way this comic is drawn and written reminds me of the old monster movies of the 1930s, where makeup was skillfully used by Lon Chaney to create his monstrous personas. Even the stage name Basil Karlo sounds a lot like Boris Karloff, who was infamous for the monster roles he played, including Frankenstein's monster and the Mummy. Ultimately, Midnight Madness is a story that touches on cult followings whilst exploring the idea of children becoming obsessed with horror villains in order to discover their own identities. However, kids who obsess and aspire to these monstrous characters often have a missing aspect of their own lives, and by trying to become someone else, they eventually lose their own personalities. This comic highlights how vulnerable adolescents are to real monsters, as they can easily be influenced into joining cults, gangs, and other nefarious organisations in the pursuit of acceptance and belonging. Ultimately, this loss of identity is exactly what happens to Clayface, who perhaps has the greatest case of an identity crisis ever. To quote writer Kevin Shinick's fantastic pun at the comic's end, Clayface finally killed at the box office. Another comic that perfectly exhibits Clayface's monstrous actions is Batman the Dark Knight Volume 4, Clay, which belongs to Batman the Dark Knight series. In this story, written by Greg Hurwitz, Clayface kidnaps an audience and gives them small doses of the Joker's laughing gas just so that they laugh along with his performance. Clayface was prepared to keep these people in a catatonic state just so they could feed his ego. To fully understand the monster Clayface became, we must be aware of his origin story, which explains his difficult childhood. Writer Hurwitz reveals that Karlo was an ordinary child who nobody noticed. Not particularly ugly or good looking, Karlo, like so many of us, fits into the unnoticed middle ground. As a result, he was ignored by the girls and bullied by the boys. In a desperate attempt for attention, Karlo manages to buy himself a cheap new outfit, which also fails in its purpose. Subsequently, his craving for recognition sees him unsuccessfully audition for the school's play, before being rejected again years later by film studios for not being interesting. Eventually, his desire for acceptance sees him make a deal with Penguin, where he is finally given the clay which gives him his shape-altering capabilities. Now, with the ability to mold his face into any desired shape, Carlo is finally embraced by Hollywood and attains the attention he always desired. However, all this notoriety came at a cost, as Carlo could no longer control the clay within his body, resulting in both his features and career falling apart. With his whole world in tatters and the attention gone, Carlo would literally become a monster and turn to crime. What I love about this comic is that it reveals Clayface to be a narcissist, as he constantly wants an audience. Perhaps this is a monster within us all, the desire to be noticed, admired, and even adored, going to great lengths to appear how we think the media wish for us to look. Like Clayface, we mould our bodies going through painful cosmetic surgery just to gain the acceptance of the media and audiences across the world. Finally, we are all aware of the horrors of cosmetic surgery gone wrong. Perhaps our desire for attention is the real monster. Although Clayface is incredibly monstrous, I think that we can do better, and my next offering is a monster that conjures some very primal fears in us all. In fact, this is a monster that has been around in one form or another since prehistoric times, far outdating mankind's existence on Earth. I am indeed referring to the Killer Croc.
Number 2. Killer Croc.
Waylon Jones was raised by his alcoholic aunt in a Florida slum where he was bullied for being born with a condition that turned his skin green and scaly. This reptilian monstrosity is said to stand at 7 foot 5 inches tall and weighs almost 700 pounds. Furthermore, he possesses immensely dense skin and powerful jaws containing razor-sharp teeth to tear his victims apart. Like any true monster, he blends both the familiar and strange with his human and crocodilian features. However, this colossal killer does not just look the part, he commits some of the most gruesome murders in the DC universe. A tale that elucidates this point perfectly is the 3-part story by Anderson Gabrick titled The Beast Beneath. This comic has Killer Croc living at the residence of Dr. Maria Bellezza while she works on a cure to reverse the mutation caused by the Hush virus. After several hours of intense work, Maria finally manages to develop a cure and injects Croc with the serum. A few minutes later, Killer Croc reverts to his human-like body, and Maria tells him that despite his appearance, he is still a man that deserves love and respect. They approach each other and the situation gets romantic for a moment, until Croc starts mutating again as his body returns to its crocodilian form. Despite continuing to pursue a remedy, Maria's efforts prove futile as the virus mutates too quickly. With the cure all but lost, Croc's basic instincts overcome his control and his hunger gets the better of him as he devours Maria. Feeling guilty after cannibalizing his lover, Croc leaves for the sewers in pursuit of the people responsible for his condition, including Hush, Black Mask, the Riddler, and Batman. As macabre as this story is, it remains as a drop of blood in the ocean compared to all the other horrific acts that Killer Croc has committed. Speaking of blood in the ocean, that allows us to transition into our next tale, which is aptly named Blood in the Water New 52. This story, published in Batman and Robin 23.4 in 2013, was written by Tim Seeley. This comic deals with themes of atavism and regressing back to your animalistic nature. Just like in the previous story, Killer Croc becomes more reptilian and feeds off the innate fear of his human victims who flee like rats and mice. In this story, Killer Croc directly addresses his own evolution into a monster, stating, "I'm a monster because life made me one. They made me one. They turned their backs on me, hurt me, betrayed me." Just like Clayface, Croc became a monster due to a difficult childhood. He is both a victim and a product of a cruel society. Similarly, he is also in pursuit of acceptance, and nothing expresses this notion better than 1991's Requiem for a Killer, written by Alan Grant. In this story, Croc finds acceptance and a new home in the sewers with a group of people that are also outcasts. Caring for them deeply, Croc begins to steal items for them as to improve their living conditions and quality of life. Subsequently, when Batman starts investigating the robberies, his findings lead him to the sewers. Unfortunately, Batman knows that the city is implementing a new delivery system and the tunnels are scheduled to be flooded at midnight. When he confronts Killer Croc, the sewers collapse around them and Croc is left with a dilemma: fight Batman or save your only friends. Presented with this scenario, Croc is compelled to go against his monstrous instincts and sacrifices himself for his human allies. However, this is not the only story that simultaneously showcases the best and worst of this character. For that, we need to explore my personal favourite tale involving Killer Croc, which can also be found in Joker's Asylum Volume 2 in Mike Rake's modern classic called Beauty and the Beast. This comic depicts Croc as a true monster, yet continues the theme of wanting to belong to a family, which began in the aforementioned Requiem for a Killer. In the opening series of frames, we see Killer Croc chained within a padded cell whilst being asked some probing questions by a psychiatrist. Angered by the session, Killer Croc performs perhaps the most gruesome escape act of all time by biting his own hands off. Now shackle-free, the Beast lives up to his name by annihilating his incarcerators. 8 days later, Croc takes refuge in the home of a couple named Edgar and Juliet as he evades police capture. It is whilst here that Killer Croc discovers something that has been absent from his entire existence: kindness. The couple tend to his wounds, provide him with shelter, food, clothing, and the possibility of a job. However, there is only one problem. The job involves organised crime. It isn't long before Edgar uses Croc's killer instinct to help him wrestle control away from criminal lord Mr. Callahan. This bold move sees Edgar become the crime boss, providing him and Juliet with newfound riches and a luxury home. So what is in it for Waylon Jones? Quite simply, he has finally found the very thing he has been searching for his whole life: a family. With his new sense of belonging, there is not much that Croc would not do for Edgar and Juliet, who take full advantage of his devotion to them. Upon becoming paranoid that they might lose control of their position of power, they order Croc to eliminate all the remaining members of the crime family. However, it is later revealed that the real threat might come from within, as there appears to be trouble in paradise. Edgar and Juliet's relationship seems to be strained as they accuse each other of infidelity, and Edgar becomes more possessive. With his diminishing trust and increasing paranoia, Edgar orders Croc to watch Juliet 24/7 as the bonds between Beauty and the Beast grow stronger. Croc realises that he has a lot in common with Juliet and can relate to her situation as she says, "He is trapping me here. He wants to keep me in this prison, this cage, like his perfect pet." As a person who was only recently kept in a cage like an animal, Croc empathises with Juliet fully and allows her out of the house to the displeasure of Edgar. Again, this only exacerbates Edgar's suspicions regarding Juliet having an affair, and he gives Croc an address, asking him to kill whoever he finds inside the residence. Upon his arrival, it is revealed that Juliet is with her lover and orders him to assassinate the Beast. Croc, however, cannot bring himself to kill her and leaves before entering the residence. At this moment, Juliet devises a plan as she asks her lover to hit her so that she can use the black eye to fool Killer Croc. As the two are united back at the house, Juliet pretends that it was Edgar who hurt her and that he wishes to kill Croc. Upon seeing the bruises on Beauty, the Beast flies into a rage and kills Edgar in front of Juliet. Delighted that her selfish plan worked, Juliet orders Killer Croc to break the safe containing Edgar's wealth, and as he does so, her boyfriend Tommy arrives and shoots Croc down. With their elaborate plan a success, the couple discuss the events in the following dialogue. "I can't believe you actually got the dumb freak to, 'Shut up, Tommy, keep shooting him.'" After hearing these words, the Beast is well and truly unleashed, and he kills Tommy before staring at a petrified Juliet, who pleads for her life. "Please don't kill me. That's right, calm down. You're a good man, Waylon. You're nothing like Edgar. You're not a monster." However, Killer Croc would not make this list if he wasn't a monster, and just like any monster, he reverts to type, killing Juliet. In this odd subversion, it seems like the Beast killed Beauty. Had the comic ended here, it would have both elucidated and validated my ranking of Killer Croc as a true monster. However, the comic does not end here, and the next frame gives us so much to ponder as Croc speaks some of his most poignant lines. "They're the monsters, not me. Put me back." So what does Croc mean by these words? By getting involved with this couple, Croc starts to care for them. His strong emotions, however, are used against him as this criminal couple trick him into doing their bidding. They use him, Edgar for his financial gains, and Juliet to cover her own infidelity. This story sees Killer Croc as a victim of the 7 deadly sins as he expresses his wrath and gluttony for violence. Croc gets caught up in Juliet's lust and pride, as well as Edgar's greed and envy. Ultimately, the couple's sloth sees Croc perform their orders as he falls deeper into a life of crime which saw him imprisoned in the first place. Their selfish games put Killer Croc's own life at risk, and in the end he becomes the monster everyone thought he was. But who is the real monster? The beasts themselves, or the people who use them to commit atrocious acts? In the end, Croc is the real victim of the monsters. All he wanted was acceptance and belonging to a family, but he only belonged to the family as a tool. They're the monsters, not me. Put me back. If you look at Killer Croc's image in this frame, it suggests that he grieves their deaths. He genuinely cared about them, but they did not feel the same way about him or each other. Therefore, they are the real monsters who are void of any caring feelings. They were the ones who masterminded all the horrific acts, not Killer Croc. As a result, he wants to go back in a cage where he cannot interact with humanity. In a cage, he can do no harm, but more importantly, he cannot be harmed by anyone. He has had his heart broken, and like anyone who has had their feelings rejected, he wants to lock his heart away from society, never wishing to go through that pain again. Despite all of his monstrous acts of violence, nothing is as horrific to Killer Croc as realizing that the couple's affection towards him was not genuine. As the comic ends, the final frame shows Killer Croc right back where he started, chained up and confined to a cage like a monstrous beast. Perhaps the Joker's initial introduction to Killer Croc sums him up the best. Killer Croc, what a monster, but like all misunderstood cannibalistic reptile men, he possesses a gentle soul. I want to end this entry by quoting a line from Merian C. Cooper's 1933 King Kong, which contradicts what I said earlier on. It was beauty that killed the beast. For centuries there has been a monster that, despite possessing very little physical threat, has terrified mankind. A creature that is synonymous with evil throughout literature and film. In fact, this creature is so intimidating that it even inspired Batman's persona in order to strike fear into his criminal antagonists. I am of course referring to the Bat. Throughout history, we have associated bats with evil spirits and demons within the Bible, and in more recent times they have been associated with shape-shifting vampires across popular fiction. However, these hellacious beings have not always been confined to fiction. In actual fact, one such creature caused mass hysteria across the East African coast, as well as other neighbouring regions in 1995. The name of the evil spirit I'm referring to is Popobawa, which literally translates as Batwing in Swahili because it was believed to cast a dark shadow upon attacking its victims. This shapeshifter was said to visit its victims at night and was identifiable by its sulphurous odour. It would attack men, women and children in a sexual nature before moving on to the next household.
Number 1. Man-Bat.
My number 1 entry has similar physical characteristics to this creature because he is of course the one we all know as Man-Bat. Once Dr. Langstrom transforms into this monstrosity, it supposedly stands at an imposing 7'4" and weighs at least 315 pounds. This winged bat-like humanoid creature possesses natural sonar and easily meets all of my aforementioned criteria. One of the quintessential stories involving this character was written in 1995 by Chuck Dixon and depicts his monstrosity fully. The comic that I'm referring to is Wings, Legend of the Dark Knight number 5, Year 1. This tale focuses on the origins of Man-Bat as Dr. Kirk Langstrom works on a cure for his deafness whilst experimenting on himself as the test subject. Eventually, Langstrom succeeds in producing a serum containing bat DNA that not only cures but sharpens his hearing to a superhuman level. However, there are some monstrous side effects to this treatment, and it is not long before Langstrom begins his metamorphosis into a giant bat. Enrique Alcatena's bleak artistic style makes the transformation appear even more disturbing, and it reminds me of David Cronenberg's movie The Fly. We slowly see Langstrom become a cloaked vampire-like creature, hiding in the shadows, too ashamed to allow his fiancée to witness his monstrosity. Langstrom's torment and descent into darkness is so severe that he eventually tries to commit suicide, but just as he throws himself off a bridge, the monster takes control and Man-Bat is born. Immediately, this creature terrorizes Gotham from above as Batman witnesses it attack a gang of criminals called the Ridge Runners, achieving what the Dark Knight was unable to do because he was unable to fly. This action causes abject fear throughout the criminal underworld as news spreads of a giant bat-like creature preying upon its unsuspecting victims. With its horrific appearance and ability to fly, Man-Bat is like Batman on steroids, generating greater fear than the Caped Crusader ever could. Eventually, Batman does indeed come into conflict with this creature as it attacks Alfred in the Batcave. Subsequently, Batman senses that it is a victim of sorts and switches the sonar alarms off, which are driving it insane. After tranquilizing the beast, Batman decides to give it the antidote, and Langstrom reverts back to his former self as he is reunited with his fiancée Francine. Despite being the original Man-Bat, I do not feel that Kirk Langstrom is the most monstrous. For that, we have to visit Greg Hurwitz's corporate raider in Batman the Dark Knight, issue number 28. This comic depicts Man-Bat as Abraham Langstrom, Kirk's abusive capitalist father who believes in the power of the individual as opposed to the collective strength of society. This character is both literally and figuratively sucking the life out of Gotham's citizens as we see the gruesome remains of his victims. The fact that he targets the homeless compounds the point further, with Abraham being this blood-sucking drain on society who has no sympathy for the poor or destitute, seeing them as the true burden. He is in stark contrast to Bruce Wayne's socialist father Thomas, who gave to society, where Abraham is a misanthropist and takes what he needs from Gotham's people. He selfishly monetizes his son's cure for deafness, which earns him billions. Dressed in his tailored suits, he embodies the worst side of capitalism and large corporations who sacrifice everything in the pursuit of profit and power. Unsatisfied by his affluent lifestyle, Abraham seeks a new thrill. During the day, he is addicted to money and draining the wealth from Gotham, but by night, his addiction is to the serum and becoming Man-Bat, where he drains the blood from Gotham's citizens. His avarice turns to gluttony as he preys upon the weak and poor, cleansing society's streets of the homeless. There are also massive contrasts between Kirk and Wayne's relationship with their fathers. Kirk is literally looked down upon by his father, who sees him as a massive disappointment, laughing at his socialist humanitarian efforts. Abraham is the monstrous abusive father, who oddly enough admires the strengths of Bruce Wayne, recognizing similar qualities in himself. The two characters are in fact binary opposites of each other, but also possess a series of similarities. Bruce is powerful, stoic and focused, just like Abraham is as a businessman. As Man-Bat, however, he is the opposite in name to Batman, but unlike his counterpart, he attacks Gotham from above, where Batman defends from his vantage points. When Batman clashes with this version of Man-Bat, he admits that it is bigger than anything he could have imagined, with skin like hide, fangs like sabers, and claws like razors. Ultimately, Batman is left worse for wear after their first encounter. Realizing that he cannot go toe-to-toe with Man-Bat, Batman outsmarts his opponent by injecting himself with the antidote and allowing the monster to bite him. Langstrom's final message is extremely capitalist, and the comic seems to be representing capitalism as a monster of society, as Abraham states. At the end of the day, how do you assign worth to people who don't contribute to society? Most of the workaday folks out there are too smart to fault me. They know that if they were in my calf leather shoes, they'd do exactly what I do. I'm a modern overlord, and overlords have to make the tough choices. They have to ensure that the system runs smoothly for those who matter, because only those who matter can run the system smoothly. I look for openings. vulnerabilities, a company on its last legs, an industry that needs to be privatised so it can run with efficiency and profit. A bum who bloodsucks valuable resources from contributing citizens, straining Gotham's social services, cashing another welfare check. I wait, and I watch, and the city, it watches me right back. Clearly, Langstrom's unsympathetic nature reverses the idea of the blood-sucking parasite back onto the poor and homeless and away from the vampiric man-bat. He is deflecting the idea of the monster away from himself and onto the poor. It is for these reasons that this version of Man-Bat is my number one most monstrous Batman villain. Not only does he look the part, but he is also monstrous in his actions on many levels. As the creature, he literally sucks the life out of his human victims, but as a man, he is equally monstrous, draining the wealth from society in his cutthroat business methods. Unlike the rest of the villains on my list, Abraham Langstrom is not a victim. He has no redeeming factors, and due to that, he is my most monstrous Batman villain. Despite finding my top 5 winner, I have a bittersweet feeling at the conclusion of this video. While searching for the most monstrous villain, I made another sullen discovery when creating this video. I came to the realization that these monsters were not necessarily the nefarious mindless creatures I had expected. In actuality, most were the victims of mankind's atrocities. This video made me think about how we use so-called monstrous animals to commit horrific acts, how we exploit them for financial gains or display them for our own amusement. After years of torture, confinement and emotional abuse, it is no wonder that these creatures finally snap and become the very thing we thought they were. Ironically, in order to see the true monster, all mankind has to do is take a look into a mirror. Admittedly, I'm not an expert on this topic, but just an enthusiast who's offering his opinions, so if you disagreed with my choices, then just let me know which characters you think are the most monstrous Batman villains in the comments section. If you wish to take a closer look at any of the comics I mentioned in this video, almost all of them are available on my Amazon store. Please just click the link in the video description, and anything you purchase will help support the channel. Alternatively, if you enjoyed this video, then please check out my top 5 creepiest Batman villains video, which deals with similar subject matter to this, and remember to like and subscribe if you'd like to subscribe. Finally, I would like to end by wishing you all a very happy Halloween for 2020. Thank you very much for watching.